I woke up on the office floor with my cheek pressed against the warped boards, and for a long moment I thought maybe I had dreamed it all. The mirrors, the duplicates, the observer's hand reaching for me, pixels glow filling the room like fire. But the silence wasn't right. The motel had a rhythm I had grown used to, the hum of the neon, the groan of the pipes, the distant shuffle of things that shouldn't have feet. Now it was too still, too balanced, like a stage set waiting for actors to step on. I pushed myself upright and realized the room wasn't the same one I had collapsed in. The desk was still there, but it was on the wrong side of the wall, as if someone had mirrored the layout. The clock above it ticked, but the hands spun backward, slow and deliberate, each tick echoing longer than the last. A calendar hung beside it, but the dates were impossible. 32 days in January, a February that stretched to the 45th, April repeating twice. I stared at it until my head throbbed, because the strangest thing wasn't that the numbers were wrong. It was that I almost recognized them, like I had seen these dates before in dreams I was never supposed to remember. Pixel sat on the desk, watching me, her tail curling neatly around her paws. For a second, relief washed over me, because she was there, alive, solid, her presence the only thing that felt familiar. But then I looked closer, and my stomach twisted. Her eyes were the same golden green as always, but the left one had a faint ring of red around the iris, glowing so softly I would have missed it if I hadn't stared too long. And her fur, there was a patch along her back where the sigil had burned brighter, the skin beneath faintly scarred as if branded. I reached for her instinctively, whispering her name, but she tilted her head away, unblinking, patient in a way no animal should be. I staggered to my feet, dizzy, clinging to the edge of the desk. My mind kept circling back to the last thing the observer had said, almost choice ends now, and I wondered if I had already chosen without realizing it. Maybe waking up here was the consequence. Maybe this wasn't even my body anymore. I caught my reflection in the dark glass of the window and nearly screamed, because for a heartbeat, the face staring back wasn't mine. It was older, thinner, hollow-eyed. Then I blinked and it was me again, trembling, pale, drenched in sweat. The reflection smiled even though my lips didn't. I spun away, chest heaving, hands shaking so badly I could barely hold myself up. The room warped again, just slightly, but enough to make me doubt the floor beneath me. The desk drawer was open when it hadn't been before. Inside lay the rule sheet, the same yellowed paper with the same typed lines. But when I pulled it out, my blood went cold. The list wasn't the one I had been given my first night. It was different. The first 7 rules were there, but warped, rewritten. And beneath them, new rules had been added in my own handwriting. Rule 8, do not count the mirrors. Rule 9, if Pixel looks at you too long, do not blink. Rule 10, do not answer the phone if it's your own voice calling. My hand shook as I traced the letters, because I knew that scrawl. It was mine, but I had no memory of writing it. I dropped the paper like it burned me, stumbling back until my knees hit the chair. Pixel's ears twitched, and she let out a low sound, not quite a meow, more like a warning hum. The clock ticked backward again, louder, and the numbers on the calendar shifted as I stared, days rearranging themselves into symbols I couldn't read. I pressed my palms to my face and tried to breathe, but every inhale carried that chemical sting from the lab, that antiseptic tang that told me I had never really left. Maybe I hadn't woken up at all. Maybe this was just another layer, another mask pulled over my eyes to keep me from clawing too close to the truth. I lowered my hands and looked at Pixel again, hoping for comfort, but she only blinked slowly, deliberately, and for the first time, I felt the weight of her gaze press into me like a hand. I didn't blink. I couldn't. Not with Rule 9 burning fresh in my head. The air thickened. The motel walls groaned like something enormous was shifting inside them. My ears rang with a low hum, and I realized it was in sync with Pixel's purr. She was keeping me grounded, but the thought that followed nearly broke me. If she was the only thing anchoring me here, what would happen if she stopped? The paper should have been nothing, just ink on faded yellow sheets. But as I held it, I realized it was heavier than any rule book had a right to be. The first lines looked familiar, yet the words were different enough that my mind stumbled every time I tried to read them. Rule 1 no longer said, "Turn off the neon sign at 11:15 sharp." Now it commanded, "Ensure the neon sign dies at 11:15 sharp." That single verb, dies, shifted the meaning entirely. It wasn't about turning something off, it was about killing it. Rule 2 used to say lock yourself in the supply closet before the knocking starts. Now it said, confine yourself where the walls can hold the sound. The phrasing clawed at me, twisting the ordinary into something clinical, predatory, like someone had rewritten the rules not to warn me, but to study what I would do when I read them. My heart pounded harder with each line. The changes weren't random. They felt tailored, angled specifically toward me, as though the observer himself had rewritten the page to test how I would react. The worst part wasn't that the rules had changed. It was that I could remember, faintly, the act of writing them. My own hand, my own pen. But those memories didn't belong to me. They felt borrowed, like someone had slipped them into my head while I wasn't watching. My skin crawled, because it meant that even my defiance wasn't my own. Then came the E8 additions. Rule 8. Do not count the mirrors. Rule 9. If Pixel looks at you too long, do not blink. Rule 10. Do not answer the phone if it's your own voice calling. The handwriting was mine. I couldn't deny it. The slant of the letters, the uneven pressure of the ink, the way the P in Pixel always looped too long. It was all mine. But I had no memory of writing them, no memory of even knowing they needed to exist. My fingers trembled as I traced the grooves, desperate to find a clue that it was forged, but every mark screamed authenticity. If I hadn't written it here, then I had written it somewhere else, sometime else, in one of the layers of myself that had been filed away and archived like the others. I wanted to burn the page, rip it to ash and scatter it across the floor, but even as the thought crossed my mind, my hands froze, locked in place by a command I couldn't name. It wasn't that I didn't want to destroy it. It was that something inside me refused to. Maybe I had already tried once before. Maybe the rules existed to stop me from erasing them again. The thought hollowed me out. The clock on the wall ticked backward, each swing slower, heavier. The calendar shifted again, the impossible days rearranging into numbers, then symbols, then letters. My breath caught as the lines blurred into a single word. Remember. The paper pulsed in my hand like a living thing, and for a moment I swore I felt it beating, syncing with my own pulse. I dropped it, stumbling backward until my knees hit the chair. Pixel leapt gracefully onto the desk, positioning herself between me and the sheet. Her fur shimmered faintly with the sigil's glow, the light pulsing in rhythm with the backward ticks of the clock. Her eyes locked on mine, unblinking, patient, eternal. The longer she stared, the heavier the air grew. I whispered her name, my voice breaking, but she didn't move. She didn't look away. My eyelids burned with the effort of staying open, every muscle in my face twitching as I fought the urge to blink. And then, against my will, I lost. My eyes flickered shut for the barest second. The world shifted instantly. The air thickened, warped, bent wrong. The light twisted, heavy as water pressing in on every side. When I opened my eyes again, there weren't one, but 4 pixels sitting on the desk, identical down to every strand of fur, every faint twitch of their tails. They all stared directly at me, unblinking, synchronized. My chest seized, panic flaring sharp, and before I could stop myself, I began counting under my breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. The second I said 4, the paper seared against my palm with sudden heat. Rule 8 blared in my skull like a klaxon. Do not count the mirrors. The moment the word left my lips, all 4 pixel copies blinked in unison, and reality fractured. The room stuttered like a broken reel of film, splitting into frames that didn't line up, each one showing me in a different position, standing, sitting, screaming, silent. For a few seconds, I saw myself multiply the way they had, fragments peeling away until there were versions of me scattered across the room, some watching, some whispering, some already dissolving into static. Then, as quickly as it had come, it snapped back. I was alone again, One pixel on the desk, the calendar blank, the clock frozen at a number that didn't exist. My chest heaved as if I had been running for miles. Sweat stung my eyes. My knees nearly buckled under the weight of what I had just seen. I forced myself to look down at the page again, but the ink had changed. The words shimmered, blurred, then steadied into a new edition. Rule 11. Do not forget you're the experiment. The phone buzzed then, low and steady, not the shrill ring I knew too well, but a vibration that rattled the desk like something alive inside it. My hand hovered above the receiver, every nerve screaming to pull back, but I couldn't. The hum grew sharper, aligning with Pixel's purr. I froze as my reflection in the window twitched, lips moving out of sync with my own. And then the phone rang, loud and sharp, splitting the silence. I didn't pick it up, but I didn't need to. The voice seeped out anyway, leaking into the air, into the walls, into me. My voice. Michael, it's already too late. The room darkened. The rules burned faintly on the floor where the paper had fallen. Pixel hissed, her glow searing brighter, and in that moment I understood the truth that chilled me more than anything the observer had ever said. These rules weren't warnings. They were memories. They weren't meant to save me. They were meant to remind me what I had already done. For a long time after the phone went silent, I didn't move. The echo of my own voice still lingered in the air, a whisper coiling around my thoughts like smoke that wouldn't clear. I kept staring at Pixel, praying for her to be the same cat I'd always known, but the longer I looked, the more I realized her stillness wasn't comfort. It was surveillance. She wasn't waiting for me to calm down. She was waiting to see what I would do next. The paper on the floor still glowed faintly with the words I didn't want to read again, and the room felt tighter with every second I refused to pick it up. Then I heard it, the soft shuffle of footsteps outside the office door. My body tensed, every muscle ready to bolt, but I told myself it couldn't be real. Nobody came here. Whispering Pines had been empty since the night I started. Every knock, every visitor, every sound had been a trick, a test. But this wasn't knocking, this was pacing, footsteps sliding across the warped floorboards of the hallway, steady, measured, deliberate. I held my breath, clutching the desk as if it could anchor me, and Pixel's ears swiveled toward the sound before I even registered it. The doorknob rattled once, then stilled. My stomach turned to ice. A pause. Stretched, the silence thicker than anything I'd felt before, and then the door creaked open slowly, as though whoever, or whatever, stood on the other side already knew I wouldn't run. A figure stepped in. A man. He wore a jacket too clean for this place, his shoes polished, his face blank but not faceless. His eyes were empty, pale as glass, staring without focus. His mouth opened and closed once before sound came, and when it did, the words froze me. "Subject MB," he said, voice flat, mechanical. "The unfinished one." More footsteps followed. 2, 3, 4 figures filed in behind him, some male, some female, some hard to place, but all of them had the same wrongness, like people copied too many times until the image blurred. They moved in jerks at first, then in smoother sync, their heads tilting at identical angles, their lips parting to repeat the same words. The unfinished subject. Their voices overlapped, merging into a chorus that felt like my own mind speaking back to me. I tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. The desk pressed against my spine, the wall cold at my shoulder. Pixel crouched low, growling, her glow sparking faintly as though warning them back. But the visitors didn't flinch. They didn't even acknowledge her. Their eyes were locked on me, unblinking, as if she wasn't there at all. One of them, a woman with long, dark hair hanging limp across her shoulders, stepped closer. Her lips cracked into something that might have been a smile if not for how stiff it was. And then she spoke, softer than the rest. "You should not be here." The words weren't a threat. They were an observation, a correction. I swallowed hard, voice barely audible. "Neither should you." The smile didn't fade. Her head tilted further, neck bending too far, bones popping quietly. "We belong. You do not." The others echoed the words a second later, perfectly timed, perfectly flat. My knees trembled, sweat dripping into my eyes, and I realized these weren't strangers. They weren't guests. They weren't even ghosts. They were test subjects, failed, archived, echoes of whatever this place was trying to make me into. One of them stepped closer still, and my heart stopped. Because his face wasn't blurred. His face was mine. The same stubble on the jaw, the same scar above the eyebrow, the same shape of the mouth. But his eyes were hollow sockets filled with static light, buzzing faintly as he stared at me. My double's lips moved, sound glitching as though it was dragged across a broken speaker. "You are late." His voice was mine, warped and wrong, drawn out in pieces. I fell back against the desk, choking out a sound that wasn't a word, my mind splitting as I watched myself approach. The others moved in time with him, their bodies twitching in patterns that suggested strings being pulled. Pixel yowled, her glow bursting into the room with sudden force, and for the first time, the visitors faltered. They flinched, blinking in unison, their eyes losing focus for just a heartbeat. The copy of me jerked, his static-filled sockets flickering, and then he spoke again, the words almost too quiet to hear. "You are not finished." The lights flickered overhead. The calendar tore itself from the wall and landed face down. The clock ticked once and then stopped. My chest heaved with ragged breaths, my fingers clawing against the desk to keep me upright. I wanted to scream at them, to demand what they meant, but the sound lodged in my throat. The visitors shifted, swaying gently, their voices blending into a whisper that grew louder, climbing in perfect rhythm until it was a chant, filling every corner of the office. Unfinished. 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 Pixel leapt onto the desk, standing between me and them, her fur blazing with light, her eyes glowing with the weight of something I didn't want to understand. The visitors froze, all at once, their mouths snapping shut in unison. The one wearing my face tilted his head again, staring through me, then whispered the words I already dreaded. "When you finish, we end." And then, just as suddenly as they had come, they turned. Every one of them, their movements perfectly synchronized, their bodies jerking once as if on a single command. They walked back through the door, one by one, the sound of their steps fading down the hallway until there was nothing left but silence. The door clicked shut softly behind them. I stood there shaking, barely able to breathe, staring at the empty space where they had stood. Pixel sat on the desk, her glow dimming, her gaze fixed on the closed door. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to, because I already knew what she was telling me without words. The visitors hadn't come for me by accident. They had come to remind me of something. I was still unfinished. When the door closed behind the visitors, I thought I'd collapse with relief, but the silence they left behind was worse than their presence. My body trembled uncontrollably, every muscle refusing to let go of the tension that had built while their voices drilled into me. The office didn't feel like an office anymore. It felt like a stage after the actors had gone, the props still in place but stripped of meaning. The desk, the lamp, the chair, all seemed hollow, brittle, as though a single touch might reveal they weren't real at all. I pressed my palms against the desk to steady myself, but the wood was warm, pulsing faintly beneath my hands, as if the motel itself was alive and listening. Pixel hadn't moved from the desktop, her body still glowing faintly with that unnatural light. She was staring at the rules page, but it wasn't attention. It was focus, the way a surgeon watches a patient's chest rise and fall. When she blinked, the sigil burned brighter across her side, casting warped shadows on the wall that bent at angles no geometry allowed. My throat tightened as I whispered her name, praying for her to flick her tail, to meow, to act like a cat again. But she didn't. Instead, her gaze lifted from the paper to me, and something in her eyes shifted. For the first time, I felt less like her owner and more like her subject. I reached for her cautiously, my fingers trembling as they brushed her fur. The moment I touched her, my vision fractured. My hand didn't feel fur. It felt wires, warm metal, humming with energy. The room dissolved into a rush of images too fast to process. Me standing in the motel lobby, me strapped to a chair in the lab, me staring into a mirror that showed a different face, me lying on a gurney with tubes threaded into my veins. Each frame lasted only a second, but the weight of them crushed me. They weren't memories I had lived. They were memories I had carried, buried in the cracks of my mind, forced down by something that wanted me compliant. Pixel's glow pulled them out, dragging them into the light whether I wanted them or not. I tried to let go, but I couldn't. My fingers were locked, welded to her body. My chest heaved with ragged gasps as her form flickered in front of me, her body stretching tall, her silhouette splitting into two, then three, each one layered atop the other like film reels running out of sync. For a moment I saw her not as a cat, but as a figure standing upright, faceless, arms outstretched, the sigil carved deep into her chest and pulsing like a second heart. Her mouth didn't move, but a voice seeped into me, soft and ancient, speaking directly into my bones. Michael, remember. The sound of my own sob broke me. I dropped to my knees, still clutching her, still unable to pull away. The visions intensified. I saw myself signing a contract in a sterile office, the word consent stamped in red at the bottom, but my hand moved like it was guided by someone else. I saw myself walking into the motel the first night, but when I looked up at the neon sign, it already bore the sigil, humming with life I had ignored. I saw myself holding Pixel as a kitten, but her eyes had glowed even then, faint rings of red around green irises. These weren't coincidences. These weren't accidents. Pixel hadn't come into my life by chance. She had been placed there, designed, engineered to tether me here. My stomach lurched, bile rising, and I forced my hand away. The connection broke like a snapped wire, leaving me gasping on the floor, drenched in sweat. Pixel sat calmly on the desk, her fur smooth, her glow dimmed, watching me with patience that made my skin crawl. She tilted her head once, and in that small gesture, I understood. She had chosen to let me go. Not because I had resisted, but because she had given me just enough to remind me who held control. The office pulsed once, the walls breathing in and out like a lung. The calendar flapped against the wall, though no air stirred, the numbers rearranging themselves into that same single word: remember. The phone buzzed, but I couldn't look at it. My eyes were locked on Pixel, my heart pounding in the realization that she wasn't my anchor at all. I was hers. She wasn't keeping me alive. She was keeping me in place, holding me together long enough for the experiment to continue. I whispered, "Why me?" But the room didn't answer. Pixel did. She opened her mouth and a sound spilled out, not a meow, not an animal cry, but the voice of a woman, clear and calm, speaking through her body as though she were nothing more than a conduit. "You agreed." The words rattled through me, hollowing me out. My vision swam, my knees buckled, and I sank to the floor with my hands pressed over my ears, but the sound wasn't in the room. It was inside me. Pixel's eyes never left mine, glowing brighter with each syllable. When her mouth closed, the silence returned, thicker than before. I sat there shaking, broken, every nerve alight, every memory suspect. The rules page glowed faintly on the floor again, letters shifting, the ink rewriting itself before my eyes into something new. Rule 12. Do not ask why. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't think, and somewhere deep inside, a part of me that still wanted to survive realized the truth. Asking why had already doomed me. I thought nothing could unnerve me more than hearing Pixel's mouth-shaped words that didn't belong to any animal, but the silence that followed was worse than her voice. I sat there shaking, staring at the glowing words of Rule 12 crawling across the page, and every instinct begged me to obey. Do not ask why, do not even think the word, but the question kept tearing through my mind anyway. Why me? Why her? Why this place? Each time it circled back, the light in the room dimmed, the wallpaper sagged as though it was exhausted from holding secrets. I clamped my hands over my ears as if that would keep the question from echoing, but the silence that pressed back was louder than sound. When the knock came, it wasn't from the closet this time. It was from the door. 3 sharp raps, precise and spaced evenly like a metronome. My body seized. The visitors had left through that door not long ago, their voices still etched in my head, and I couldn't bear to see them again. But the knock wasn't theirs. It was too clean, too deliberate. My breath caught, my eyes darted to Pixel, and she was already watching the door, her glow dimmed to a faint pulse, her gaze steady, patient. Then the doorknob turned, smooth, quiet, inevitable. The observer stepped through, and this time there was no distortion, no flicker between shapes. He was a man, clear as daylight, the same pressed black suit, the same polished shoes, the same pale skin that carried no warmth of blood. His round glasses caught the dim light and bent it into static that shimmered across the lenses, erasing any hint of what lay behind his eyes. He adjusted his tie with deliberate calm, as though arriving for a meeting he had scheduled weeks in advance, and when his gaze finally fell on me, the air in the room folded in on itself, thick and crushing. "Subject MB," he said, his voice sharp and resonant, each syllable precise. "Phase 7 begins." I wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, to break Rule 12 on purpose, but the words caught in my throat like thorns. My lips parted, my breath rasped, but nothing came. The observer tilted his head slightly, watching me as though even my silence was data to record. "You ask why," he said softly, almost kindly. "But that question was archived long ago. It is no longer yours to ask." He turned his head toward Pixel, nodding once in acknowledgement. "Anchor remains functional. For now." Her fur bristled, glowing faintly, and for the first time I thought I saw defiance in her stare, not patience. The observer moved further into the room, his presence bending space around him. The desk creaked under the weight of something unseen. The walls flickered between motel decay and steel corridors, and the rules page on the floor shimmered as if rewriting itself line by line. He stopped in front of me, his shoes inches from where I sat trembling on the ground, and crouched so that his glasses reflected my face back at me. "Do you know why you see so many versions of yourself?" he asked. His voice was calm, steady, but beneath it ran a current of command. "Because you are not singular. You are not whole. You are fragments, each memory torn and tested, each choice repeated until the correct data emerges. You are unfinished because you cannot decide." I shook my head violently, tears burning my eyes, because I knew he was right. Every night I had followed rules, broken them, tested them, resisted them, but I had never truly chosen. I had survived because I clung to Pixel, because I obeyed the warnings, because I begged for mercy, but never because I made the decision myself. The observer leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper sharp enough to cut. "Almost choice has carried you this far, but almost will not carry you further." The monitors burst to life along the wall, dozens of screens crackling with static before stabilizing into images that stole my breath. Rows of me, restrained in chairs, each hooked into machines, their eyes wide with terror, their mouths open in silent screams. But these weren't past glimpses. They were live. I could feel it. Each double twitched in rhythm with my own heartbeat. Each shudder of theirs echoed in my chest. The observer extended his arm toward the screens. "Look. Observe yourself. These are the versions archived in failure. Each one believed they were the original. Each one begged for release. Each one ended here." Pixel leapt down from the desk and padded to my side, pressing her body against me as though to ground me, but the glow from her sigil pulsed harder, syncing with the static hum of the screens. The observer smiled, faintly, the first hint of expression I had seen beyond calm. "She binds you," he said. "She sustains you, but she also prevents you from finishing. You cannot remain tethered forever." His hand extended again, this time not toward me, but toward Pixel. "The anchor is burning. You will choose, replace it, or consume it." I gasped, shaking my head, clutching Pixel protectively against my chest. "No, she's mine." His voice cut me off like a blade. "She was never yours. She was assigned. You agreed." The words rang through me, hollowing me out, echoing with Pixel's own earlier voice, that same impossible calm. I staggered back, my mind tearing in two, because if both of them said it, if she said it, Then it had to be true. The monitors flickered, the doubles screamed, and the observer rose to his full height, looming over me with that patient inevitability. The next phase requires closure. Tomorrow you will sign what you have already signed. Tomorrow your consent will be complete, and then, subject MB, you will finish. He adjusted his tie again, as calm as when he had entered, and turned toward the door. Before he stepped through, he spoke one final time, the words cold and final. You have one night left to remember. Use it. The door closed softly behind him. The silence that followed was unbearable, pressing in on every side, heavy with expectation. Pixel curled against me, her glow dimmed to a faint ember, her eyes unblinking. I couldn't tell if she was protecting me or preparing me. The rules page shimmered again, and when I looked down, a new line had appeared. Rule 13. When the observer speaks, do not answer. The room didn't recover after the observer left. It only decayed further. The silence that followed was not absence of sound, but a weight, pressing down on me until each breath scraped raw through my chest. Pixel curled against me on the desk, her warmth fragile, her glow flickering like a dying filament. Each time her light dimmed, I felt something inside me unravel, my hand blurring at the edges, my fingertips becoming transparent before snapping back, my thoughts skipping like a broken record. It was as if I was no longer whole, no longer stable, tethered only by the faint pulse of light shuddering from her body. I pushed myself upright, gripping the edge of the desk as the rules page continued to glow faintly on the floor. Rule 13 pulsed in my mind. When the observer speaks, do not answer. But it was already too late. I had answered too many times. Each broken rule felt etched into my skin, carved into me like tally marks, reminders that I was never meant to resist this long. The clock on the wall ticked once, then froze, its hands trembling at a place between seconds, unable to move forward or back. The calendar shifted violently, numbers smearing into symbols, before finally settling on a date I didn't recognize. It was circled in wet red ink that dripped onto the floorboards, and though I tried to tell myself it was just paint, the smell of iron betrayed it as blood. Pixel shivered in my arms, her eyes flickering, her pupils dilating too wide, swallowing the glow until her irises became bottomless pits. The moment they dimmed, my vision fractured. My reflection in the dark glass lagged behind me, lips moving seconds late, eyes rolling back as if I were a puppet on delay. I raised my hand, but the reflection lifted both. I blinked, and in that split second, the room was filled with hundreds of versions of me, each at a different frame of motion, some screaming, some silent, some already dissolving into static. They flickered around me like ghosts of myself, waiting for their turn to be archived. I clutched Pixel tighter, desperate for her to hold me together, but the weight of her body felt wrong now, too heavy for a cat, vibrating faintly with the hum of the machines I had heard in the lab. She was breaking, and so was I. My teeth ached as if they might crack, my bones humming like tuning forks, every nerve firing sparks through my body. Then the voice came again. The observer, though he was nowhere in sight. The anchor's breaking. Prepare replacement. My stomach dropped into a pit. Replacement. The word gutted me more than any threat. I shook my head violently, clutching Pixel so hard she whimpered, my tears dripping onto her fur. No, you can't take her. She's mine. But the voice cut through, calm and final, leaving no room for argument. Anchors are not possessions. They are assignments. When one fails, another is provided. Subject stability requires it. The walls groaned, light splitting through the seams, carving jagged scars across the wood, the paint, even through Pixel's trembling body. Her glow flared too bright, then dimmed so far I thought she was gone. Visions poured into me like acid. Flashes of every moment Pixel had been at my side, but twisted, reframed. I wasn't adopting her. I was being handed her across a steel table by a technician in gloves. I wasn't feeding her at my kitchen counter. I was monitoring her in a sterile room, her bowl marked Anchor MB. I wasn't whispering to her in the dark to keep loneliness at bay. I was completing nightly check-ins required by a protocol I had agreed to without memory. The images overlapped until I couldn't tell which were real and which were planted, until all I had left was the burning truth. Pixel was never mine. She was the tether they had built for me. The far wall of the office peeled away, not collapsing but unfolding, like paper pulled back to reveal the layer beneath. What stretched beyond wasn't motel or lab, but a corridor lined with cages, dozens, maybe hundreds. Each one pulsed faintly, each one humming with the same unnatural vibration I felt in my bones. And inside each cage, my heart nearly stopped. Cats. Every one of them identical to Pixel. Some kittens blinking with hollow eyes, some adults, glowing faintly with the sigil etched across their fur, some lying motionless on the floor as though they had already burned out. My breath caught in a sob as I stumbled toward the nearest cage. Inside sat a smaller Pixel, her body trembling, her eyes wide but empty, hollow like the sockets of my doubles. Her form glitched at the edges, paws fading in and out of focus, tail stuttering mid-movement. The cage hummed, the bars vibrating with static, and then the lock clicked. Slowly, with a sound that scraped my ears raw, the door swung open. The replacement anchor stepped forward, her movements jerky, mechanical, each step wrong, as though her body hadn't learned how to belong in this world yet. The observer's voice filled the room, closer than before, as though he stood just behind me. Replacement ready, transition imminent, subject MB will comply. My chest heaved, my throat tearing as I screamed, "No!" clutching the trembling Pixel in my arms tighter than ever. Her heartbeat was faltering beneath my hands, stuttering in and out, her glow barely a whisper now. Tears blurred my vision as the hollow-eyed replacement took another step closer, her mouth opening with a glitching snap. The sound that came out was thin, broken, but unmistakable. One word, the word that had haunted every wall, every mirror, every voice. Remember. Pixel, my Pixel, let out a sound then. Not a meow, not a scream. Something in between, raw and guttural, like the tearing of fabric and the cry of a human voice fused together. The walls shook with it, the cages rattled, the floorboards cracked beneath my knees. The replacement didn't stop. She kept moving forward, eyes burning with empty hunger, the hum of the cages rising in chorus as if every anchor was waking, every cage calling to me. I looked down at the Pixel in my arms, her glow dimming, her breath shallow, her eyes meeting mine with something too human, too knowing. She wasn't asking me to save her. She was asking me to choose. My legs gave out, my body collapsing to the floor as the replacement closed the distance, her shadow stretching over us both. The light consumed everything, and in that final instant before it swallowed me whole, the last thing I saw was her mouth moving, not in command, but in promise. "You will finish."